So Landy, you're not in the middle of a jury trial?
I am not. That is Judge Beal's first jury trial for Justice Court. So I was just there to help, and then I'll be back later.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So thank you all for joining. It is 10:30, and I am actually myself in the middle of trying to either resolve a trial that is scheduled for Monday, but the individual whose trial is scheduled is not quite here yet. Something I think we all have experienced. So I would welcome you today. We have a full agenda, and I'd like to get started. I may be joining you for a minute and then going on mute and then listening. I may be rejoining, so you may see me pop in and out because of the other conflict. I'd like to acknowledge today all of you who have joined, and I'm not as familiar with Teams, so I only see your initials. We will be doing a roll call, so then I can verify everyone who's present, but thank you again for joining. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the meeting is being held on the traditional homelands of the Salish and Pend Oreille, and to acknowledge those tribes' contributions to the area, both historically and currently. I appreciate all of you who do have stronger connection to the tribes and your participation in the meetings to help us to be more culturally sensitive to the kind of various issues that we attempt to address, perhaps not as successfully as we'd like, but as we continue to forge on and break down some of those cultural barriers with our work with the CJCC. So with that, again, I'd like to welcome you, and I will begin with the roll call. And so is Commissioner Josh Slotnick present? Under Sheriff Rich Marcelli? Chief Jason White?
Chief White is trying to connect right now, and apologies, Josh Slotnick and Mayor Engen sent apologies.
That's fine.
And Rich's not on. Dave Conway's here for him.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So we will recognize the alternate, Dave Conway, for Under Sheriff Rich Marcelli. And is Chief White is attempting to log in. I don't know if Assistant Chief Scott Hoffman is also present. So Judge Landy Holloway. So we have a choir here. Great. Jennifer Striano.
Here.
Commander Jason Kowalski. Or Lieutenant Alex Hall.
Here.
So thank you, Alex. Alderwoman Julie Merritt.
I'm here.
Thank you, Julie. Alderwoman Heather Harp. Bureau Chief Kim Leath.
Here.
Is Brian Kellerman joining you, Kim?
He is not.
Okay. Mayor John Engen. Is Dale Bickle joining? So now Judge Kathleen Jenks. Maylin Smith.
Here.
Thank you, Maylin. Kirsten Pabst, our county
I'm
attorney.
here.
Thank you, Kirsten. We'll look forward to your conversation soon. Keithy Worthington from the City Attorney's Office. Angie Bakken from the City Attorney's Office. Deshane Barnett. Or Ann Douglas. Chantel Gaynor.
Present.
Thank you, Chantel. Erin Pian. Or Teresa Williams. Lori Francis. Becca Go. Or Jody Faircloth. Sue Wilkins.
Here.
Thank you, Sue. S.K. Rossi.
Here.
Thank you. Shirley Faust. or Amy McGee? Courtney Callahan?
Hello.
Hello, Courtney. Chief Marty Ludeman from the university. Amy Sings in the Timber from the Innocence Project. Sergeant Sean Finley. Captain Chad Deaver. Joe Thagert from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lori Pope. So Lori's here.
I'm here.
Great.
I'm here.
And Bart Hope. So if I haven't called your name, if you'd please just state your name so we can make sure. So I see Representative Sands. Ann Miller.
Here.
And a few others who perhaps I don't recognize. So if I haven't said your name, so Mr. Thompson.
Yes, I'm here.
And can you remind me which agency that you might be affiliated with?
I'm a case manager with the Public Defender's Office.
Great. And then others that I may have not mentioned.
Susan Cretina.
Thank you, Susan. I did see you.
We also have MCAT here.
All right. Thank you to MCAT staff.
Jim Morton. Jim Morton with the Human Resource Council.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you joining us.
Emily Copeland, also with the Public Defender's Office.
Thank you, Emily.
Gretchen Ann Hughes with Missoula County.
All right, Ann, thank you. Looks like Erin, I didn't say you, so Erin Kautz.
Gretchen Neal, Missoula County Mental Health Coordinator.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Rebecca Go, Partnership Health Center.
Thank you, Rebecca. I started my roll call a little early, and I know a few people joined in a little later.
Heather Harp with City Council.
Thank you, Heather, for joining us.
You bet.
Any others that we've missed? So feel free to throw your name in the chat if we've missed you. We just want to make sure we have a record of everyone who's attending.
Hi, I'm Thomas. Oh. Sorry, I'm Thomas Lescom, investigator at the Public Defender's Office.
All right, thank you.
Morgan Haney, Crime Victim Advocate.
Thank you, Morgan.
Jeremy Marrow with the OPD. Hello, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Chief White has joined as well.
So thank you, Chief White. Maybe you could just say hello, Chief White. I haven't gotten to meet you personally, so why don't you just say hello to us? Give us what's currently on your mind with regard to policing in Missoula.
He's just sent a text in that he doesn't have any audio.
Right.
So
we're gonna have to send a tech over to his office.
Yeah.
To give him a good start with regard to joining with all these crazy Zoom and Teams and other kinds of platforms. So with that, again, I think we should get started. I do appreciate everyone's attendance, and hopefully we can get to the meat of our program. As you're quite, I hope, aware, we're in the process of kind of reconfiguring and reproposing our scope of work for next year, and our coordinator, Kristen Jordan, has been working on a budget. I'm sure that she will be able, toward the end of the meeting, to give us an update with regard to her work there. But we're always interested in, I guess, issues that are coming up or issues that you might be encountering in your work in the criminal justice system. So please feel free to reach out to us at any point. It is the CJCC is kind of our organization. We need to direct its work, and we need to address problems that we're encountering in the course of our work in Missoula and the surrounding areas. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Kirsten Pabst. Kirsten and I go back a long way. We've been working in the criminal justice system, and I'm older than she. And today it looks like I have lots of bags, so I feel like I'm really old today. Plus, I'm 6 inches from this camera. But nonetheless, Kirsten and I go way back with regard to criminal justice issues. I've taken a few different tracks and was more involved in kind of the civil areas, child abuse and neglect and mental health. And Kirsten's work has primarily been focused on criminal work, both prosecution and defense. And I know that she's been an excellent trial advocate and has always been a star with regard to trial training and innovative programs. So I know that in her work recently, she's been really exploring alternatives to help improve the criminal justice system. And she's actively been implementing some programs in her office as well as visiting programs across the country. So I'm quite certain that she has some great information to pass on to us and also some ideas. We certainly value her contributions. So Kirsten, please take it away, and I'm going to put myself on mute.
Thank you very much. So Leslie and I had checked in earlier in the week, and she asked if I would speak to you for a few moments today. I'm really happy to do that. And then I took a peek at the agenda and saw that you had me on there for 45 minutes. And I don't think I know enough things to fill that much time, but I'll talk a little bit about what's been happening in criminal justice since COVID hit. And then I will talk a little bit about some ideas that my office has been working on, and then leave some time for some questions from you. I had sent an email out last week expressing some concerns about sort of what's going on in the criminal justice system, and the fact that it was a response to Miss Jordan's email about the jail bed numbers increasing again. And my concern was that that snapshot appeared a little two-dimensional, because what we're seeing is is just extremely complex. And so I wanted to sort of give some background to why those numbers are going back up, and maybe offer some ideas that we can do, at least big picture things, to address that. And I think Jennifer Striano actually might have as good or better information as I do on some of these dynamics. So Jen, feel free to jump in here if you have any other feedback. So as I stated in my email, our numbers in 2019 in all of the federally indexed violent crimes had gone down pretty significantly. And although we'd love to take credit for that, we can't take credit for much of that. But part of that was sort of a multidisciplinary approach to targeting the most dangerous high-risk offenders that posed risk in the violent crime category, as well as drug trafficking. And then those concerted efforts really did help in some ways drive down the number of arrests and the number of crimes. We saw a pretty nice trend in that regard until the COVID restrictions hit. And not surprisingly, when people began to be locked down, our numbers went up in those violent crime categories. I don't have the data in front of me, but I summarized it in that email. In April, May, and June, those numbers went up really significantly, particularly with regard to partner family member assault cases and interpersonal violence. July was pretty alarmingly high. We're hoping that that was a blip and not a trend exponentially upward. But it's hard to say when we're looking at numbers that Missoula has when you look at 1 month, whether it's a trend or a blip, until we have a few more months of data. But the question that was posed to the group at that time was, why are our jail beds being fuller than they were earlier, than when we had kind of cleared it out when COVID first started? And I guess my concern is that if we're just looking at jail bed numbers, and I don't want to oversimplify, because I know that the CJCC has done some really pretty impressive and complex work, but I think we need to look beyond just the numbers of people that we have in jail and as a metric for our success as a group and as a community. When some of the folks that we released when COVID struck, we're sort of in that middle ground group. We've got the offenders who are just going to stay in custody. You know, the violent homicides, the repeat violent offenders, sex offenders are going to stay in custody. There, not too many people would debate that. And then we're trying to off-ramp the low risk, lower needs folks through diversion and some other programs. And we've done pretty good at keeping those folks out of jail with the help of a lot of collaboration and work with the jail review and things like that. But it's this middle ground of folks that present some risk, that often are drug addicted, that tend to be the wild cards. And those are the ones that I think we're seeing the fluctuation. But so I just wanted to let you know that my understanding is we are measuring failures to appear differently amongst different entities, and it's significant with regard to how it affects the data. And Kristen, feel free to jump in here and help me be more articulate. But in our experience in the last 6 months, folks are failing to appear at alarming rates, and they're not necessarily being marked for purposes of what we're counting in this group, because warrants aren't going out, which is the marker when they're considered to be a failure to appear. In our experience, some of them are not appearing for court 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times before a warrant goes out. The reality is we don't want these people in jail if they're gonna, if there's a chance that they're gonna, one, either be successful, or two, infect the jail with COVID. We're taking extreme measures to try to keep that out of our jail population for lots of obvious reasons that we don't need to go into. But a lot of these folks that are being released or that are failing to appear multiple times before a warrant is issued are committing new crimes. We've seen a kind of an uptick too in overdoses, drug overdoses, resulting in hospitalizations and in death. Folks that are pending trial. And so as a community, we look at those incidents and ask ourselves, what can we do better? What can we do to help these people? And it's the answer. I don't have the answers, and I tried to explain that in my email to you, but I do have some suggestions. I also wanted to point out, we've been working for 20 years, 25 years since I've been involved in the system, on reducing the length of time it takes to process a criminal case. One, it's better to get people into resources earlier rather than later. Two, it's less expensive to process cases faster. And three, we're all really, really busy. But there's a flip side to that too. And sometimes with the population that we work with, the time delays in court actually contribute to rehabilitation and help to get a person on the right track or into treatment. A lot of those, getting somebody lined up for that, and Jen, feel free to jump in, is not an easy process. And there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. And so sometimes these delays, oftentimes they benefit the population that we're serving. Not always. And I'm not saying there's not wasteful delay that we can work on, and we'll continue to do that. But I don't want to ignore the fact that sometimes it takes some time and some pressure from the court to get somebody motivated and ready for treatment. The other thing that I wanted to talk about and sort of just start a dialogue is that the reasons that folks are not appearing, or the reasons that folks are are not succeeding in criminal justice now and forever before and probably forever after are so complex. This idea that we can just send a text message and remind somebody that they have court is going to solve the problems of failure to appear, I think is a little bit naive. Some of the reasons that people don't appear are it's centuries of cultural oppression, mental health issues and challenges, severe depression, addiction, lack of housing, lack of transportation, lack of a support system, and the fact that maneuvering your way through the criminal justice system is an intimidating bureaucracy on the best of days. And so when you add all these layers of complexity and challenges for this population, it's not surprising that sometimes they don't appear in court. And we try to take a really balanced approach towards how we deal with that and drill down a little bit on why this particular person is not appearing. And anyways, there's an art to it, and there's no really easy answers, but I guess I wanted to open up the conversation about the complexities of this particular population. And as always, we are open to any suggestions and ideas that you have. When we ask, what can we do to help? What can we do to be better? I think it's important to look at what we need locally, as well as what's working on the national and state levels, but what's working locally. And if we can find things that are working and helping, let's study that and replicate it. I have to say, I spent yesterday afternoon with the Flathead Reservation Reentry Program, and I know Anne's on this call, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go to one of their staff meetings, which I really appreciate. For those of you who don't know about that program, it's a solutions-based holistic program that works intensively with folks on reentry and prevention for reentry on many levels. It's been a really successful program, and their recidivism rate, although we talked about this yesterday, recidivism is another one of those markers that is a little bit artificial, but their recidivism rate is significantly lower than other corrections programs, whether they be private, nonprofit, or governmental. And so I want to really look at things that they're doing that's working. And I have to applaud our public defender's office as well, because I know that they've made concerted efforts to take a holistic approach as well. The reality is that they are just completely overwhelmed with numbers, and I mean, we offer our support, and obviously we lock horns at times, and we're adversaries in court, but really we all have the same goals in the long run, which is to help get some of these folks off of the criminal justice track. The reentry program on the reservation, it has a manager, a holistic director, 2 psychologists on staff that work a day a week. Feel free to jump in, Anne, if I've misunderstood any of this, but they work, so that's approximately a half-time psychologist who also does chemical dependency and addiction evaluations and treatment. And then there's 2 case managers, which I know they keep hopping, that really provide intensive and just really a variety of services to help people navigate the criminal justice system and life in general. So without going into the weeds on that program, what I can tell you is that we are looking at sort of taking the best of that and expanding our prosecution-led Calibrate diversion program, and try to replicate it at least on a pilot project to see if we can replicate some of the same successful results that they've been able to see. I've been able to study some similar programs in other jurisdictions, and we've been exploring some potential funding for a pilot project like that. So anyways, that's about all I wanted to share with you. I feel free to jump in and offer any clarifications or ask any questions that you might have.
I have a question, Kristen. Do you know how many Native American police officers are in the Flathead?
I do not.
Because I know one of my observations is the ratio of Native American officers, that we have in Missoula, and I've been attending a lot of meetings where, kind of like peer support work. The Native American police officer can relate to a Native American going through criminal justice system because they understand the traditions and everything, and then there's less recidivism. And I was just wondering if that might be part of the success that's happening in Flathead.
Well, the Salish and Kootenai tribes police force is entirely tribal members. I don't know the numbers of officers that they have, but they're all tribal members. They're trained at the state academy, so they're state certified, but they are all tribal members.
And I
Rossi
think go ahead.
Sorry, I thought we were moving on. Just Rossi has their hand up, so Rossi, you've got the next question.
I can wait. I can go after Ann. Please go ahead, Ann. But I'm going to hold my place for after Ann.
I don't have anything to add except to tell Kirsten that I have an idea about a possible partnership that I want to talk to you about later.
Okay, great. We'll circle back.
Yeah.
Thanks. I had just a couple of questions. The first one is, I know you said you don't have the data sitting in front of you for the rise in, quote unquote, violent crime rates, but can you get that data and send it to the rest of us so we can actually see what that rise looks like in real time and on paper?
I can. I don't have anything more current than what I sent out last week, though. Okay. But I'm happy to share that again.
Okay. And then the other thing I was wondering, and it's always hard to tell when looking at the jail roster, whether or not folks are being held in Missoula County Jail based on, I don't know if they're being held there for the city or held there for the county, but even just in my brief perusal of that roster this morning, I just went through the A's and the B's, and there were definitely people in there on violent crime charges, but there are also still definitely a lot of people in there on condition violations and FTAs. So it doesn't seem like this is just down to violent crime rates. It seems like there's still a lot of people being placed in jail for FTAs and conditional violations, which, I think we all agree isn't necessarily useful all the time. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit. And then I have another question for you about your reentry program.
Sure. So yeah, there are a lot of folks in jail on petitions to revoke. Not as many as historically have been in jail, I don't think. And part of that is a concern for their own safety as well as safety for the community. A lot of the folks, and maybe Kim might be able to address some of the revocations that are in custody, but with some of the addiction situations have gotten so dire with the overdose deaths and the drugs that I know that after multiple repeat offenses, that some of the judges are getting frustrated and asking for more bail. I can't really talk about specifics, but there's a variety of folks in there. I'm sorry if I gave the impression that only violent offenders are in jail. What I was trying to say was that group, it's some of those folks, it's pretty easy to not debate whether they should be in jail. And then there's the low level folks that we really don't debate, don't need to be in jail. It's that middle ground where there's a lot of room for disagreement.
Thanks. I'll take a look at that data. It's really, I mean, the jail roster is really hard to navigate. And that's not that's not your fault. But it's really difficult to figure out, especially between the mask holds and the county jail holds. Just looking at the roster this morning, like I said, I saw 3 or 4 PSMAs and I think a sexual assault. But everything else was mask holds and conditional violations. So it seems like even if we do have an uptick in violent crime and people who need to be held because they're a serious violent threat to the community, there's still a lot of work to be done on letting people go who aren't a serious violent threat to the community. And just because we don't have treatment doesn't mean people should be held in jail to dry out and make their court appearances.
Well, I realize that we have some fundamental disagreements about what to do with people when we don't have treatment available, but I don't know that this is necessarily the forum for that. I do want to point out, though, that you're talking about lots of mask holds. Those are not even county inmates. Those are beds that we rent out to the state and their prison inmates. So we could do a lot of tricks and call in a lot of favors, and those people would never be let out. So we don't have any control over that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that the mask holds were your responsibility. I was just saying that it's hard to decipher in the jail roster who's being held for the county and who's being held for mask and on, for what reasons.
It is. It's not the most friendly program.
Yeah.
I'd like to add that we actually run a jail population analysis every week that'll, just muted myself, that'll tell you who's on what hold for what court. So you can use that to kind of cross compare with the jail roster. If anybody wants to be added to that list, please just add your name to the chats menu, and I'll make sure you guys get that update every week.
Thanks. And then I just had one final question for now, I think, and I'm sure I'll have more later because that's my MO. But from the research I've read and the work we've done on reentry programs, at least from a civil liberties perspective, we're big fans of objective programming and objective leadership of those programming. And it really doesn't sit well with me that a county attorney's office would be implementing a reentry program when reentry is mostly about the person's needs and having support and, having essentially what I would equate to good social services. I feel a little uncomfortable about a reentry program being placed in that or used in a prosecutor's office. So I'm wondering if you can talk to me about how, or talk to me a little bit about how county attorneys are well positioned or well trained to run a program like that when it's mostly about providing support to folks and building trust with those people.
Are you done? You ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Nobody else is doing it. I think it would be better suited for another entity, but I see that as the biggest gap in what we can offer people right now are these one-on-one, helping them navigate some of the difficulties and the layers of challenges that they face in mental health, in addiction, in getting their driver's licenses back, in dealing with child support, in dealing with orders of protection, in getting their social security, disability. There's just layers and layers of it, and nobody else is doing it. So if we can start a program that works, and there are, the ones I've studied are prosecution-led reentry programs that are successful. And I when I say studied, I have not gone out there and interviewed people. This is sort of, we're in the contemplative stage, but those programs are prosecution led. And so if we start it up and get something going and somebody else wants to take over, like the ACLU, I would be happy to hand the ballot or pass the baton. But it's a gap in services right now. And the Public Defender's Office is doing some good work in that regard. And if we can work with them and buttress those efforts, I'm not proprietary about where this lands. It just needs to happen.
I can add to that, Kirsten. I think that, the way there are prosecutors' offices that are doing reentry. There are probation offices that are doing reentry. There are reentry programs that are residential. Our approach to reentry is early intervention, so the earlier the better, even upon arrest, to start working with people. And our approach is supportive services, not surveillance, as one of my staff people described. So, I mean, I think I'm always willing to look at going outside of, your usual barriers and looking at partnerships. And I think it's doable. And especially if you were to partner with service agencies.
Who staffs the reentry program for the county attorney's office?
What reentry program?
Didn't you just say you were running a reentry program?
No, I said we're hoping to implement a pilot project to replicate some of the great results that the Flathead program is getting.
Oh, so who would staff that? Like, so I guess I'm curious if it's like going to be a person, like, are you going to hire a new person that has like a social work background, or
yes.
Like, is it, okay. So it would be staffed by someone who's trained in
hopefully we would have an attorney, a case manager, and a chemical. In a perfect world, our tiny little program would have an attorney to help with collateral legal matters for folks, a chemical dependency addictions counselor, and a case manager.
So I guess, is there a reason why something like that wouldn't, if there's going to be resources for it, is there a reason something like that wouldn't just be housed in a different department that is more familiar with providing that type of supportive service?
Well, we are providing that type of supportive service right now with our pretrial diversion program. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that this is necessarily the best time and place to debate where the home for a new reentry program should be, because I'm open at this point. A discussion might be better than a debate, but yeah,
well,
it makes sense.
And I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, it makes sense that it would be housed within the Office of the Public Defender. I would welcome conversations with state leadership to sort of work with them on doing it there. Whatever it takes to get it done.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Thank you, Rusty. Sorry, Lori, there's a few people who've had their hand up for a while. Is this related specifically to that conversation? Is it related specifically to the conversation that we just were having?
Yeah.
I think the other comments are too. So let's just go with in order. So Jennifer Striano, who's just now getting up from her desk, was next in line. If you're ready, Jennifer. Thank you, Lori. Just pop your hand up, Lori.
Sure, thanks. So Kirsten, I just wanted to kind of go back to, when I looked at the agenda as to what you were going to be talking about. I just want to maybe focus some more questions on that. I guess to start, I really just want to make sure that when we provide information like this to the public, it can sound very alarming. And so I think we should be very responsible about where this information is coming from, what and where we got this information. So I guess, because looking at our numbers, we don't really match in terms of seeing an increase with violent offenses. So I, have some concerns about that. So I guess first off, just really basic, you said that the offenses that you were looking at were the federally indexed violent offenses. I guess I don't know what that means.
If you will give me a minute, I will go and grab that.
Okay.
I didn't know exactly what we were going to talk about. I just wanted to, Leslie just asked me to speak for a few minutes, and then I saw 45 minutes on the agenda, so.
Oh, you might have missed the email I sent asking how much time you needed. Sorry about that, Kirsten.
No worries. Dave, feel free to jump in here as well with the PSN numbers, okay?
Yeah, I don't have those in front of me.
if you want to really drill down and talk about these, maybe now would not be the best time since I'm not really prepared to do that. I mean, I have the basics. I get them from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and when they count apples, they're not necessarily the same as our apples because they define aggravated assault differently. They didn't include sex crimes, which we do, things like that. So rather than saying it's an exact number, I think it shows a pretty accurate trend. And that was the point that I was trying to make. I'll show you, I'll give you a quick glimpse of what my sheet looks like with my notes because I had some of the same questions.
So are these cases are you saying these numbers correlate to actual filings by the county attorney's office in Missoula?
No, these are arrests.
Oh. Okay. And so if these are just arrests, then we don't really know what the actual, sometimes the prosecution can be declined or things like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. And so they may not always lead to, so if they don't always lead to charges being filed, that could be why our numbers are lower than your numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It could be due to the way they define some of their crimes too.
Right. So they're not using the 45 code 45.
No.
Title 45. Okay. Okay. So a lot of variables there. It sounds like.
Yeah, but I think it's a pretty good indicator of the trend, though. The fact that we're up in every category since COVID. And we were down last year.
So I guess I'm concerned. I guess one thing with your email, you'd indicated COVID restrictions. What does that mean, or how do you think that's correlating with this?
I'm not making correlations. I'm not a social scientist. I'm just showing you that in the months of April, May, and June, the numbers went up, and then in July they went up significantly, and that. My understanding of the COVID-related restrictions and lockdowns and quarantines and people staying at home started in mid-March.
Okay, and so you think this potential increase is due to those restrictions?
I don't know.
Or that at the point of the, okay, I just was referring to your email there.
I'm just saying since that happened, the timing would lead us to believe that, yeah.
Okay. The other question I had, I have a few. So the other one is, I think you indicated that this validated your concern for these kind of an increase in meth fueled offenses. I'm just wondering, how are you determining that these violent offenses are, again, meth fueled?
Well, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but by far the vast majority of the cases that we are filing involve some sort of substance abuse, and very often it's methamphetamine.
Okay. So that's just kind of you don't have any data on that or any research on that or analysis. It's just kind of what you're
I could come up with some numbers for you. I do crunch those every December for my annual report, but I had no idea we were going to be talking about that today.
Okay. Well, I think it's really just focusing on the email that was sent, because I guess my next question, this email was sent in response to the Justice Management Institute did a jail analysis. Their conclusion said that our jail population initially pre-COVID was 43% for failures to appear, pretrial violations, and probation violations. After COVID, it's now 37%, which is still a pretty high number. Your email, I believe, was in response to that report. Does that mean
no, it wasn't. I haven't seen that report. I don't know. I don't disagree with what you're saying is in it, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, so this wasn't in response to that report.
No, it was just a really quick response to the request to talk about why jail beds are, why we're filling more jail beds locally.
Okay. Your office is involved, and we do a jail review. It's been kind of in a little bit of hiatus, but we're picking it back up. We do a jail review meeting, hopefully every week. Have you been involved in those, or have you?
Yeah, we've been.
Information shared to you
Sorry, we've been really involved with that. Matt has, my chief criminal deputy.
Okay.
I think you know that. You've been working with him.
What I was asking, how does that information get to you? Does he share that information with what we discuss at those meetings? Or
not all of it, but yeah, definitely he shares the highlights.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's all really I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Kirsten. Next with their hand up is Kim Lee Heath.
Afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple things. One is to highlight what Kirsten was saying about just the complexities. I think it's really important that we remember that we talk a lot about numbers, but underneath those numbers, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of dynamic variables that happen, and we're dealing with human beings. So I think that's really important to remember. I also just want to talk real quick to give maybe a little perspective on numbers and kind of how people are doing. And PMP is definitely seeing a lot of what Kirsten's saying. I mean, we're just seeing a lot of methamphetamine use and heroin use, and our officers are doing kind of very similarly what it sounds like the district court is doing. There's a lot of warnings, a lot of, don't do it again, a lot of you got to show up, and then there's the warrant, then there's the arrest. In Missoula, the Missoula Probation Office has 1,287 folks on supervision. Currently in the jail, we've got one that's a probation and parole division hold, which just means we're screening that person, trying to figure out where to place that person. One is set to go to pre-release. One is set to go to an assessment center. 2 are set to go to the prison. 19 are currently pending revocations. Kirsten is correct. We've seen less of those in the jail because we're trying to work with a lot of them that are pending out in the field. We have 37 that are pending new crimes. They're on it. They're not on a PPD hold, but they've committed new crimes that are in the jail. We have 4 that are pending charges, and they're also on our hold. So out of 1,200, almost 1,300 people, that's I think that's pretty good. And what I mean simply by that is we still have people that we're supervising in the community that could easily be in the jail, but the officers are working with them. And it's difficult to do those things, but they're managing because we have some service providers in the community that are helping. And we've got a lot of folks out there that are kind of white knuckling it. So I think it's just important to recognize that as much as we're drilling down and trying to figure out what we can do to assist, there are a lot of things that are currently in place that I think actually are assisting and working. We definitely have to get better at support systems and connecting people to recovery programs with peer supporters, those types of issues. But when we're talking about jail numbers, it can be complicated, and these cases are very difficult. The PTRs that are going through right now, those petitions to revoke, oftentimes they have multiple reports of violation, which means that the person was given an opportunity to come back out, and then they continued to violate and were not safe anymore for the community, so therefore they went back into the jail. So I just do want to give a shout out to all the folks that are working within the system at this point, from judges to county attorneys to public defenders to POs, that there's a lot of cooperation that is happening. There's a lot of positive things that are moving, and we can always get better, always. And that's all I want to say.
Sorry, pushing the wrong buttons here. Thank you, Kim. The next person with their hand up is Judge Landy Holloway.
So, hi, thank you. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do appreciate the hot topic of reentry today, and having developed the Reentry Coalition of Partners for Reintegration, having worked with Anne and various people that have been through with the program for I think we started back about 6 years ago. I'd like to acknowledge that there are a lot of prosecution-led reentry programs. There's a lot of things that are happening in a lot of various ways. 6 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago, Kimberly had told me it was going to be 10 years before probation and parole ever had any successful reentry program, and I laughed at her. I worked really hard for several years, and we made lots of progress. The governor had a task force, the prison had the program, the Department of Corrections, and our local probation and parole has supported a probation officer to be involved in Partners for Reintegration. I just kind of want to do a little shout out and hope that, and I know that Kristen Jordan has been involved with PFR and it's kind of come under the CJCC. If there's truly an interest from various people throughout this organization, it's worthwhile to really invest in what that reentry looks like. We're talking a lot about how are people getting in jail? Why are they staying there very long? What we have to fix as a community is when they do come out of jail or prison, how are we making people whole, giving them the resources so that they don't end up back in the system? So, I mean, I think there's two ends, right? Keeping people out, but when they get in, how do we then still keep them out? And so I would propose that since there was interest and there's a lot of collaboration here, and I'll speak, Lori Pope has been involved for a long time, and Jim Morton have been dedicated participants of Partners for Reintegration, that I would propose the CJCC start working a little bit more on reentry and making it focused. There are programs and models throughout the United States of where it is actually modeled within the county, not within a specific agency, because there needs to be some type of support and structure. And Partners for Reintegration has been nonprofit. There's not, and it's a lot of volunteer work. So with that, I will mute myself and step aside. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge Holloway. I might just add, I know Judge Halligan referenced this at the beginning, something that's been percolating along for months since the beginning of the year is looking at a reentry program in the jail. And I just reworked our MacArthur budget to find that we do have enough money for 2 positions, and we're looking at potentially putting in a, I don't know what the right terms are, but basically somebody who does a risk needs assessment. So Kirsten talking a lot about all those things that you referenced, whether or not they need help getting their driver's license or getting housing or need a ride to an appointment. So they'll be doing a risk and needs assessment on people before they leave, and then a warm handoff to somebody who will action that risk needs plan. So at this point, it's going to be a bit of a pilot project for a year. We're going to, of course, apply data metrics to it to ensure that we're, picking up on where the gaps are and potentially picking up on where the program's been successful. But this is something that we're going to hopefully roll out in the next month or so. Chats have been occurring with the commissioners and the sheriff's department related to this particular program. So just parking that on the space that we are trying to do a reentry pilot project that's going to sit in the jail for right now. The next person with their hand up is Lori Pope, although she didn't have her hand up, but she was coming after Judge Halligan.
Yeah, I don't have the option to raise my hand on my phone. I really don't have anything to add after Landy and Kim. They pretty much covered exactly what I wanted to say, and did part of Partners for Reintegration and working so closely with the CJCC little subgroup. Thanks, guys. You said it. You said it all.
Thanks, Lori. Next person, Detective Conway, please.
Hi there. I just wanted to jump in and stand up for my buddy Kirsten a little bit as she was kind of getting beat up on some of this stuff. So I think I've been doing this for about 23 years, and I can anecdotally say that we in law enforcement are seeing more crime and more just craziness going on than I've ever seen before. And every patrol officer that I talk to and every detective that works for me will all tell you the same thing. It's just out of control at the moment. And I understand that we don't want to raise public alarm, but I'm alarmed. Things are getting worse, and we can debate the reasons of why that is until we're all blue in the face and we're all going to have different opinions because we come from different perspectives. But the reality is that it is. And the reason that people are in jail is because they committed crimes. And the reason there's more people in jail now is because there's more people committing crimes. And it's really just quite that simple. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Detective. The next person with their hand up is Ann Miller.
I'm glad that Judge Holloway spoke. I just want to acknowledge that she was doing reentry before any of us, before it occurred to any of us, and on a grassroots voluntary level, which is incredible what they've been able to do. But just in terms of jail populations and county jail populations, one of the things that's contributing to that, from my conversations with the parole board and DOC, as we've been tracking our clients, there's some backup because of COVID. So when there's outbreaks, then DOC isn't moving people around because they're following public health protocol. So there's some backup in county jails, and the parole board's trying to do hearings. Those people that are held in county jails and really behind on some of those, and that's all COVID related, is my understanding, just because they can't move people through the systems when there are outbreaks and quarantines that they're adhering to.
Thank you, Ann. Next person with their hand up is Jake Coolidge.
Hello, everyone. So I guess I wanted to just address the potential rising crime rate. And I guess it's worth mentioning that although I'm a public defender, that my background is in social science and social science research and crime rates and criminology. And when I read the figures from Ms. Pabst's emails, I don't think that they necessarily reflect a raise in crime rates, which I think is probably the important thing that we need to keep our eye on, is crime rates rather than instances of crime. And I think that when it's shared in response to decreasing or increasing jail numbers with COVID, there's an implication that those raising crime instances or rates are because of pretrial detention policies. But I'll note that the increase that she referenced in the first 3 months during the COVID lockdown was roughly a 7% increase from the previous year. And we're living in a community with a sustained growth rate of 10%. So those numbers, as far as I see it, arguably show a lower crime victimization rate than they do an increasing one if the crime rate increases by 7% in a year where the population increases by 10%. So I don't necessarily think that those rates show an inherent crime rate increase. And I think it's even more of a stretch to try and connect that with decreasing or changing pretrial detention policies. I would agree with Ms. Pabst that probably when you see a month like July where it just jumps off the page at you, that's typically more of a statistical anomaly than it is some kind of longer term extrapolated rate that would show that kind of violent crime rate is increasing. So I think that it's important when we're talking about these things to keep our experiences and analysis rooted in data-driven analysis. And even though people have anecdotal stories, I think that we'd be better off in a data-driven justice rebuild if we make sure that we're focusing our conversation and our conclusions on things that's actually reflected in hard data. So that's what
Thank you, Jake. I don't see any other hands up. Is there anybody else who wants to ask any more questions or provide comment on this agenda item? I know Kirsten needs to leave to get to another function. So any other last questions for Kirsten or comments in general on this topic?
So Kristen, this is Judge Halligan. So I did get my plea done. I hope I didn't interrupt you, but maybe that's why I wasn't looking at you when I was doing it. I do think and I didn't get to hear all of the conversations, but I'm encouraged to hear interest with regard to continuing reentry and trying to figure that out. As Jake just said, kind of the data rebuild, or we need a data rebuild. We don't have consistent data, and so it's really hard to track what's going on. And then lastly, what I'll say is that in addition to the COVID issues that may prevent people moving from the jail to other locations, we also, of course, have kind of slowed down our jury trials because we need to have each judge assigned 1 week, and no other judges can do a jury trial. So it has delayed, of course, the process there. So I'm hoping at some point, because it really drives all of us nuts, that we can get back to a schedule where we can try to move these cases along a little bit more. but given the restrictions, we're doing our level best to work with other people to get cases processed as timely as we can. I guess the last issue is, I know that all of you are working in special areas, and again, collaboratively will be much stronger than trying to kind of isolate and work in silos. So I hope that we can move forward and really tackle these problems. Using peer navigators, there's lots of options that I think we could implement to be very successful. So I appreciate everybody's conversation, even though I didn't get to hear all of it. I know that I can listen to it again once we're finished. So let's perhaps then move on to the next folks on the agenda. And I have to, of course.
It's me.
Navigating. Go ahead then, Kristen.
Thank you, Judge. So one of the things that we'd like to start implementing at these meetings is bringing in some of the issues that are identified at our local with our local expert working groups. So we currently have 4 or 5 of them that are meeting pretty regularly. One of them is the jail review team, and due to time, I just went through the list of kind of policy and procedural issues that our jail review team has identified to start this particular approach at our CJCC meetings, where we're actually going to be bringing issues from our expert working teams for you guys to discuss and hopefully come up with options for a resolution. So in our jail review team, as I mentioned, we've had quite a few policy and procedural issues come up that we'd like to discuss at some point. But the one that I picked for now, because I wasn't sure what time would look like today, is how some of the folks who are in jail pre-trial are there because they have been required to take an anger management course, and they've done that, but they don't have the money to pay for the fees related to taking that class, which means that they don't get their certificate, which is something that is keeping them in jail right now. And I wanted to put that out to the group to see if there are any ideas behind how we could address this, because this is simply, by all appearances, looks like perhaps a ability to pay issue, and wondering if there's any other solutions that we could come up with as a group. It would be wonderful to look at perhaps potential funding sources. I know I was going to reach out to Aaron Kautz about this and see if there's any magic money laying around, but I wanted to open it up for discussion and see if anybody has experience with this or any ideas for how we could address this, because we do have folks who are currently sitting in jail pre-trial who cannot afford to pay for their certificate. So I'd like to open it up for conversation if possible.
Do we have any idea what kind of money this is? What the cost of programs are?
My understanding is that it's around $600, but I would definitely take some input from other folks on that.
I know it used to be $25 per class, and you had to have 40 hours, and the classes were an hour and a half. So whatever that pencils out to per person, that's what it used to be. I don't know if it's gone up or if it's changed, but
yeah, it's roughly, I think, around 600 is the cost.
Okay. So potentially this might be a meeting where Lori Francis, please, has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Well, just a quick question. I mean, sort of related to the last conversation too. I think that so much of what we talk about currently.
Oh, we're losing your audio, Lori. Sorry, Lori, we can't hear you.
I'm not talking to you.
Lori Francis, not Lori Pope.
Oh.
All right. Well, it looks like Lori Francis is frozen a bit. She did put a comment in the comment bar saying, "Isn't the cost of a day in jail far more than the certificate? Why don't we offer it as a county free?" So the cost, my understanding, the cost per night per defendant in jail is $115. So if we keep somebody in jail between 5 and 6 days while they await, trying to figure out how they're going to pay for the certificate, then yes, there is we run into a different type of cost that is accruing. What is so we've got an offer to check and see if the county can provide this type of funding. I'd like to look and see if potentially we could find some funding in our county tribal matching grant. Aaron, are you still on the call, and do you feel comfortable talking about that. Hi, thank you.
I am here, but I had to step away for a second and I missed what the certificate was for.
It's for folks who've had to do anger management as a condition of pretrial release, who have done the course, but can't afford to pay for it. And so they can't leave jail until they come up with funds for that. And I was wondering, is there SAMHSA or county, all the magic funding sources available that might be able to pay for something?
The hard thing with the county tribal matching grant is that there really has to be a connection to mental illness. And so I don't want to, it would be hard basically to try to make that connection with people getting anger management. I don't know. I would have to think about that.
How would it be hard to attach a mental health to anger management? I would think that there's a lot of mental health diagnoses attached to people who are going through anger management.
I did put Erin on the spot. So Erin,
no, it's okay. We just had, I actually just was in touch with the state with this because we've been in touch with the public defenders about helping pay for bus tickets for people going to treatment. And basically the state said, you just really have to make that state, because the funding is really intended to be allocated to divert people from the state hospital and from incarceration. And so if people are already incarcerated, but granted, they're waiting. So they get charged, so they have to get anger management before sentencing is what you're saying? I thought it was post-sentencing. It's pre-sentencing? Okay. Jennifer,
You're
I think
on mute, Jennifer.
You're still on mute, but I saw that you said I could read your lips.
Sorry. Oh, that's very good. Post-sentencing. So
It is.
The requirement for their sentence will be to do the 40 hours. And then generally it's revocations is where we're seeing, is what in the jail review team, we're seeing a lot of people just being in jail on the revocation for failing to do it. And some of them, they're saying, I've done it, I just can't pay the money they won't release the certificate.
Okay. Just
one option, I think, a lot of these providers, and some, they're good providers, but again, they're private, so they cost, this much. I'm wondering if it would be a cheaper or an alternative to provide. Another alternative would be have the county hire a provider who offers this class, and you just pay that salary.
I think I think that sounds like a really good potential solution, because I was even thinking I know they have to go through the FIVES course if it's like their first or second PFMA or something like that. And that's the family violence intervention, whatever, and education. And so I didn't know if we could also then do it if they successfully complete the FIVES, maybe they could get either a discount or something, because just back when I was in that world, I felt like I heard from people that the FIVES was more potentially more impactful than the anger management, but I don't know.
Counseling.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's different for everybody. So.
And I think that given the uptick that we've seen with regard to domestic violence related offenses, that having more options and more providers offering those services would be very helpful. I do think that there's a high need. And Lori Francis, you're back. I hope that we can hear you.
I thought you guys cut me off because you didn't want to hear. No, I'm joking. My computer just closed down immediately as soon as I started to talk. But no, thank you for the conversation. The tension's interesting. I think we all want the same thing, and I know we do. And I think there's a sense that each of us isn't doing enough. And I definitely feel like partnership is not doing enough always, that people don't have good access to substance use treatment. They don't. They don't have good access to mental health support. They are in a housing crisis. They are poor. And it kills me to think that people have to pay $650 and stay in jail because they can't. That is absolute discrimination based on poverty, right? And we do that in this society all the time. So that's all I was going to say is what Erin was saying, is the idea that why would we not offer our own course, whether it's partnership or the county. I mean, we just don't have enough access to supportive services. And we see that partnership people in crisis. And as I wrote in the notes, we're really excited to get into the mobile crisis work. That's still way downstream. Let's see if we can prevent the crises. And so I look forward to working with, I mean, we have thanks to most of you, we have the Strategic Alliance for Behavioral Health Support that's happening with Terry Kendrick and Becca leading that with all of you. I think we could do a lot more to keep people out. And then once they are they're re-entering into really difficult worlds. Of course, they're not going to be able to stay out. Of course, they're not going to be able to maintain housing. We haven't changed the structural issues in their lives, which are really difficult. But it's hard for me to think about people in jail who have so many barriers to success. And I know that's what you're all about, and really, really appreciate it. It's painful to listen to this because we have a long way to go. And appreciate the work. I just think we just need to keep connecting and figure out, there are some resources in Missoula that are not well connected yet, and then there's a dearth of many. And it would be a lot cheaper to invest in substance use and mental health than it would be to put people in jail. And I know you know that, and that's why you exist, but let's redirect those resources. Okay, that's all. And we want to be part of the solution too, and we're busy, and you're busy. So let's keep thinking about how partnership can partner with you guys as we do this work.
Thank you. We do have some hands up. Judge Halligan, if you want me to just go through the list of folks with their hands up. Chantel Gaynor. Thank you. Chantel Gaynor, please.
Hi, just circling back to the conversation about anger management education. It is important to make a distinction whether or not it is anger management or batterer's intervention. The partner family member assault education is a little different than sort of anger management. It's with the premise that actually lots of people are really good at managing their anger. You know, they're not flying off the handle in the grocery store, they're waiting till they get home. They've managed their anger. It's a different set of behaviors that are at play. And so if we do start talking about if the county is going to start providing these services, I think it's important to have some experts, particularly in domestic violence, be part of those conversations. You know, I've done this work for many, many years, and the hard truth with batterer's intervention and anger management treatment is it actually has a very low success rate of changing behavior over time. It's more like a way of monitoring behavior for the amount of weeks that somebody's in treatment. And so I think it'd be worth having a broader conversation of if the field has moved, if there's been learning, if there's more effective interventions that could be part of what we build. And then the second part is just from my own experience of trying to get services in Mineral County, it's hard to find providers who are willing to do it and willing to do it consistently, who are well trained and effective. And so there's a pipeline issue as well. So just keeping that in mind as we start looking at something we might do to meet the need. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, it seems like it would be great to, first of all, offer it in-house so we can cut the costs, but also looking at expanding the types of programming that we are offering. Carrie Jabablo is next with her hand up.
So actually kind of on a similar note, I was just going to point out that the statute that requires the 40-hour of counseling actually, does not require that it be a batterer's intervention program. It requires counseling through someone who's defined as a professional person. Oftentimes what happens is that our clients are told they need to go do one of these programs, and it's specifically the cost becomes a problem because of that, because these programs don't accept Medicaid or don't accept their insurance, and so they are expected to then pay for it out of pocket. But if we, as the legal community, did a better job of kind of understanding that they could actually continue counseling with their own counselor that they may have been seeing, that they can pay for through private counseling. So long as the counseling incorporates a focus on violence and controlling behaviors, it satisfies the statute. So we are kind of pipelining these folks into specific programs like Man Up, like these other group programs, but that's not actually the requirement of the statute, and that specifically is what creates a burden on our clients at times. Sometimes they don't have insurance, sometimes they can't pay for anything, but at times they do have available alternatives, and I think there is a misunderstanding about how they can satisfy that requirement, or they are directed that the courts or the state or somebody wants them in these group environments because they think it better addresses the issue, but then it becomes unattainable for them. So I think that's important to also consider. Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie. Stephen Thompson, you're next.
Hi. I just wanted to real quick throw this out there as a resource for anger management classes that Winds of Change does offer anger management classes, and they bill Medicaid for it. And there's no cost out of pocket to the participants of that class. I just called over there and they said that they are a court-approved program. The only thing that they have is, as a requirement, is that the participants complete a psych assessment beforehand, but I know that's not very helpful for folks who are actually in custody, but it is a resource available for people who have Medicaid.
Thank you, Stephen. And for folks who don't know Stephen, he's a case manager at the Public Defender's Office. So he has a lot of access to potential resources. Well, that's it for the hands up. Are there any final comments on this particular issue? I think we have a couple really good ideas, and I appreciate everybody's. Oh, wait, Laurel Hess has her hand up. Sorry, Laurel. Go ahead, Laurel.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning to that classes are being required where maybe the evidence-based portion of it or the success rates. I hope that in the future we can also consider more restorative justice solutions for survivors and for other folks who, you know, are willing to participate in that kind of engagement, just to sort of open the doors and create more options for people who have been accused of or have committed violent offenses, and that they really do to deserve a response that is comprehensive and restorative and can bring healing on all parts. I know that those efforts can take quite a bit of resources and time, but I hope that we can be open to discussing those in the future.
Thank you, Laurel. Erin, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say one last thing. So we do have, you know, a small amount of funds left in the county tribal matching grant for the rest of this fiscal year. And I would be open to having a discussion more about using those for anger management or batter intervention for individuals that can't pay. And I, you know, I'd be happy to talk to the state. I just don't want to assume that everybody that needs that has some sort of, you know, mental illness, but we could do that. But I do think it, as Chantel and Jen kind of and Lori Francis mentioned, you know, I think that there is also this bigger issue, like that whether or not this is the best use, or, you know, is this still best practices for people, and maybe it's, you know, it could be a smaller subgroup that talks about that and determines, you know, maybe if there's other more effective interventions that could occur.
Great, thank you. Awesome outcomes. Thank you all very much. So the next meeting, we're going to try and have more of our expert working groups bringing these issues to the table to have these types of discussions. So that was a great first start. Thank you, everyone. Erin, I'll be in touch.
Now, should we move to updates? So Stephen, you have a new program that perhaps you can introduce to us. So Stephen Thompson from the Office of Public Defender. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's not necessarily a new program. It's sort of an expansion on the Pathways to Justice court that we had at Project Community Connect back in January. And some of you might be familiar with it, where we had municipal court and justice court available to folks who came to Project Community Connect, who were seeking to access needed resources in the community, and then if they had maybe an outstanding warrant for a failure to appear or a misdemeanor, nonviolent crime, something like that, they were able to potentially quash that warrant and take care of any fines during that event. And there were some incentives involved as well, where their fines were discounted by a certain amount of money, depending on the court. And we got some feedback from that, and it was fairly positive. And we also got some suggestions on what we could change and make this a little bit more accessible for folks in the community. And then we thought to do it biannually. And then unfortunately, there was an event that was actually scheduled for today that we were hoping to have another court for, but that event was canceled. But then we got to thinking about how with COVID lockdown and how the courts all kind of went to a virtual video court. Basically, the infrastructure for a virtual court, very similar to the one back in January, is already in place. And it would allow for the courts to be able to reach out into the community and meet people where they're at and make court a lot more accessible if we could have, if we could set it up where folks could appear by video to basically do the same thing, quash warrants and take care of any kind of legal issue that they might have going on with the court. And we could, there's a lot of different options that we can really explore with that and make it very flexible. But basically, the idea is to increase engagement with the defendants who are facing nonviolent or misdemeanor charges, and to really kind of gear that court to be more person-centered, to, like I said, to meet the person where they're at, not just where they're at physically, but also where they're at with their circumstances and paying attention to, I mean, Kirsten Pabst was talking about that in her presentation about the number of complexities that are involved with going on in people's lives that cause them to fail to appear. And this could just be one of those things that could possibly serve as a solution to that, so that they don't have to actually appear at the courthouse. They can overcome some of those barriers, and the court can actually meet them where they're at and sort of overcome those obstacles that people face. So yeah, there's a lot more to it, but we're still very much in the development stages. So I won't go into all the minute details about it right now, but
Stephen,
I guess if anybody has questions, that's fine.
Sure, you're talking a lot about kind of the lower courts, I think, justice court and city court. But I really don't think that you need to just limit it that. So we certainly in the district court also don't want to keep issuing warrants. And I know that people often are very fearful that once a warrant is issued, that the only way that they're going to get to the court is through jail. And so they're going to avoid everybody and everything. And I know that we're certainly open to having them come in on their own. So you might be thinking about including some of the nonviolent warrants as well in the district court, because we're doing a lot of technology outreach, and I don't see any reason why the district court shouldn't be included as well.
Good, thank you, Judge. I'm actually really happy to hear that, because we have talked about involving district court. And the only reason I'm speaking about justice court and municipal court is because those were the only two courts involved in the pathways to justice court at the PCC event. But I think it would be an absolutely fantastic opportunity to involve the district court as well. And I guess that was kind of like down the road thing while we kind of figured out the kinks in the beginning stages of it. But sure. Yeah, for sure, that conversation is already happening.
Great. Thanks very much. Any questions? Any more questions for Stephen? Judge Holloway, do you have any thoughts?
Sorry, Quinn Ziegler raised his hand as well. Sorry, Judge.
Right. That's okay. Let's go to Quinn and then Judge Holloway.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Quinn Ziegler. I'm with Data.
A little more, Quinn, we're having trouble, a little louder volume.
Sorry, hopefully this is better. My name is Quinn Ziegler. I'm the nothing.
Quinn, we really can't hear you. I'm sorry. Is there any way to increase your volume or take your headphones off or something? I'm not sure. Sorry.
Better.
Better? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just had a question, Stephen. Something that we've talked about within our team in the Criminal Justice Services Division is the extent to which folks are aware that they have an active warrant out for their arrest. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the clients that you work with, if that's an issue, are folks aware, and how you might be able to help with that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an issue. I don't really have any kind of concrete data about like who's aware, who's not, and how people find out. But I think it's something that we need to explore and find a way, find some kind of solution to reach out to folks who may not be aware. That was something that we sort of talked about as well. But yeah, there's definitely, I think, a need to try to figure out how to approach that sort of issue.
Yeah, why I ask, because I think it's something that we've been mulling over ourselves. Certainly text reminders have been a topic of conversation to get folks to appear for their court appearances. But I think there's also an opportunity for some technical outreach to help people who might not be aware that they have an active warrant out to access that information online, and then, in tandem, be able to pair it with sort of a warrant amnesty day where they can have that warrant quashed. So I just wanted to offer our partnership. If that's something that you're interested in, I think it's something we are certainly interested in pursuing as well.
Yeah, great, absolutely. Yeah, we should get in touch then.
Yeah, will do.
In fact, I'll put my email in the comments so people have it to get in touch with me about this.
Judge Holloway, do you have any last thoughts about that?
I will just speak to what Justice Court has been doing. We do quash warrants over the phone via Zoom. We are not encouraging people to come into the courtroom. I know that we've had some people who have had technical difficulties. They've gone over to the public defender's office, or they actually have come into the courtroom when we have court. We don't want the warrants out there. We don't want unnecessarily, people going to jail. However, I think just it's a general thing to keep in mind. If we can't reach people, we call them, we send letters. But if we still can't reach people, that ultimately ends up in a warrant, somewhat of a placeholder for that case, that if that person comes into contact with law enforcement. We have been doing virtual court appearances since March, and I don't know if everybody is aware of that. We want people to call, schedule, show up. But they can call in just by telephone. They don't actually have to call in by video. We will quash warrants. We will also continue to work with people on resetting fines and doing community service in lieu of fines. So we really want to make the court accessible. And some of the messaging we've had from the beginning is call the court. If you have questions, you want to know what's going on, just call the court, and we're going to work with people. So thank you.
Thanks.
And more on that too, I think one of the goals that we have with this project is to make court less intimidating for folks, and sort of like kind of face the scary parts of court, because that's a huge thing for people, is that if they do miss a court date, then they don't call because they're kind of scared of the repercussions. And hopefully this sort of project will address that as well.
Great, thanks for taking it on, Stephen. So Kristen, why don't you tell us about the phones, and then we'll do a little public comment and thank everyone for their time.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just wanted to make sure, I'm sure most people have heard of this, but we are starting to offer phones to folks who are who have an active criminal justice case. We are distributing them through Jake Lapke at the courthouse, who is the Smart Court coordinator for Judge Halligan's treatment court. He's handling all the phone requests for the courthouse, so for Justice Court, District Court, and all the specialty courts. We're also giving them to Stephen Thompson and Colin Fitzmaurice, who are the case managers at Public Defenders. They will be able to hand out phones. And when I say phones, I mean phones, minutes, and plans. So it depends on what people need. We've got it for them. I've been in touch with the municipal court. They're going to start rolling out this program next week. The limit is that I can only buy 2 phones in 1 transaction, so I have to. And so I'm beefing up our phone stock, but please reach out to myself or to Jake Lapke or to Stephen Thompson or Tina Reinke If you have anybody who needs a phone, to stay in touch with their lawyer and or has an active criminal case. That's my update. Thank you.
Great. So any public comment? Anyone who would like to make comment that hasn't had an opportunity to do so? Please raise your hand.
Please raise your hand.
Unless you have a phone and then that doesn't let you raise your hand, and then please just interrupt. All right. I don't see any hands. Any last comments then for the good of the order? All right. Thank you all very much. It's 12 o'clock. I appreciate your patience and your comments. We look forward to making some change. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.